Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Father Ted, Black Books and the IT Crowd are all regarded as among the best sitcoms of the last 30 years. And my next guest created, or co-created, all three of them, Graham Linehan. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation.
Thank you very much.
Now, Graham, you've been on the show before and we've talked about all of the things that have been happening to you over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And you've become embroiled in the debates around trans issues and women's rights and this kind of thing. And what's been happening recently is you've been very much vindicated, I think, in terms of what you've been warning about for many years. But perhaps you could talk us through, for the people who don't know, how did you go from comedy writing into this world?
Oh, God. Well, I just kind of started noticing that women were being really kind of violently abused online. And, there was a previous occasion where it happened, which I actually think I might have got slightly wrong in some ways, but it was called Gamergate. And I did exactly the same thing then. And I was praised by everybody. You know, all the people who went on to counsel me. But then I kept defending women when I wasn't supposed to.
Yes.
And that was when, their sports started being destroyed, their private spaces started being taken away, and children started being medicalised. I wasn't supposed to keep up the feminism.
No, and women were...
When all that happened.
We were seeing death threats, rape threats against feminists who wanted to preserve single-sex spaces, and you were calling that out. Yeah,
it was Gamergate again.
Yeah.
It was exactly the same language. I mean, the thing is, Gamergate, I think, had... so it was a kind of a weird thing that happened about, I think, 10 years ago now, where there was it was one of the first examples of a social media storm where no one could really figure out what was going on.
Yes.
But if you were on one side of it, you had a very simplistic take on it, which is these people are evil and they want to drive it. But then, the more I found out about it, the more I've realised that some within that social storm, whatever you might call it, were actually warning about the type of thing that we've been coming up against now.
Yes.
Is, the rise of queer theory, postmodernist thought in academia, all these trickle-down things that are leading to such problems now, like the drag queen story hour protests, which are getting worse and worse, and they're going to lead to someone getting hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in short, I suppose we are talking about a group of activists who are now very powerful in society who believe that gender should be prioritised over biological sex, and that has ramifications for gay people, it has ramifications for women, and you've been speaking out about it. And for doing so, you've been utterly cancelled and vilified.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so kind of... it's been a strange couple of years, but at the same time, I don't see how I could have done anything else. I don't really see how anyone can go along with this. It's so obviously harmful to gay people. Like Stonewall, bullied Alison Bailey through Garden Court chambers. Pink News, which is a big propaganda rag for gender ideology, has been sued successfully twice by two different lesbians.
Yes.
This is an anti-gay movement.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to explain to people because they just see it tied up with all the kind of pride celebrations and they just think, oh, no, well, why are you making a fuss?
Yes.
And you get the same kind of response that the lesbians there were a group of lesbians a couple of years ago who lay down in front of Pride simply because no one was listening to them and everyone was calling them names.
Well, I think Stonewall...
couldn't get heard otherwise.
Stonewall dines out on its reputation for many years past, and people don't realise that it's changed. And people don't understand why so many gay people are offended by Stonewall, by the idea of them redefining homosexuality as being same-gender attracted, saying that women who don't want to sleep with people with penises are sexual racists, the phrase.
Yeah, Nancy Kelly said that lesbians were guilty of a form of sexual racism by not wanting to sleep with men.
Yeah. So this is... Which strikes some people. I mean, you laugh, but it sounds homophobic.
She's still in charge of Stonewall, which is supposed to be an LGBT rights organisation. It's just extraordinary.
Yes.
And what's the weirdest thing about it is that none of these people can see how offensive it is, can see... saying that lesbians should examine their prejudices about sleeping with men is a form of rape culture, Yeah. And it's being pushed by all these people, many of whom I think are just credulous and don't really realise what they're taking part in. They just kind of, they put their hand over their heart and they say the mantras, whatever they're meant to say. They think they're helping. But in a few years, we're going to look back at all the kids who've been through the Tavistock, 9,000 kids over 30 years with no follow-up studies.
Yes.
And that is going to be a mental health crisis and just a health crisis that's going to last for God knows how long.
Well, we're starting to see the lawsuits. I mean, Richie Herron, young gay man who no longer has genitals because he followed the advice of people who just affirmed his views on gender. And he's now suing the NHS. For people who don't know, the Tavistock Clinic, the Paediatric Gender Identity Clinic, has now been told to shut down because the Cass report has said it is unsafe for children because children were coming along and being put onto puberty blockers after 1 or 2 consultations. A child says they're unsure of that they think they might be in the wrong body, and instead of investigating that and considering maybe they might be autistic, they might be gay, they might have all sorts of reasons for gender nonconformity, they just were affirmed and put on a path to medicalisation. It's a massive scandal, right?
It's a massive scandal. And the thing about it that I find most extraordinary is that all the evidence for the scandal has been in full public view for a number of years.
Yes.
If you want to see something extraordinary, have a look at Susie Green's TED Talk.
Yes.
She's the CEO of Mermaids. And essentially she stands up to a bunch of nerds at the TED Talk and basically says that the reason she thought her kid was a different sex was because he liked girls' toys.
Yes.
And that's like the only reason given.
Yeah.
Cut to, the kid is 16 years old. She takes him to Thailand for the operation. This is after years of putting him on hormones.
So often these diagnoses are largely driven by gender stereotypes. So
yes, but also parents who, for whatever reasons, there was definitely homophobia, as Susie Green says, in the TED Talk in her own home. The kid was obviously trying to please the parents.
Yeah.
There's a whole host of things going on there. But nothing is examined because this ideology has accepted that there's a type of special person called a trans person, right? That are like gay people and that are like... But it's not true. It's like trans is as a category is so wide, it means nothing now.
So we're not talking about people who suffer from gender dysphoria, trans people who need to transition because they can't be happy without that. No. And those people exist and they need support. But you're not quite...
No, like I'll give you a good example. There's someone who's on the advisory board, the trans advisory board at Stonewall. And his name is Alex Drummond. He's got a full beard. And he wears dresses, and he thinks that makes him a special, magical person that's never existed before.
Yeah.
And it's nonsense.
So
it's insulting. It's insulting to women. Like in Ireland, I don't know if you saw it just the other day, but there's this bald bloke who makes...
I did see this.
He makes absolutely no concession to, not even a bit of lippy or an earring.
Yeah.
It's just
he's just playing football, right?
He's playing football against much younger girls. The girls were under 16s, I believe. He's in his 30s.
And I've seen...
What's he doing on that team?
What's incredible about that as well is the image of that's been shared online. Feminists have been kicked off Twitter for sharing that image and saying, this is a man.
Well, that's another thing that I'm hoping will kind of will come out over the next few years, which is that, people like me and Posey Parker and Megan Murphy and Holly Lawford Smith, we weren't banned from Twitter for hate speech. We were only banned from Twitter because we refused to bend the knee to this new ideology.
Can I ask you about this? So in addition to your Twitter ban, you were visited by the police, yes?
Yeah, I think I've been visited now. I was visited twice or 3 times. I've got a call from them once.
OK. And because of what, specifically? One
was a con man got the police on me. Then his friend got the police to come around one day.
Because of things you'd said about this discussion, this debate.
Yeah, but in the case of the con man, I was specifically saying this bloke is a con man.
OK, I see.
And and not only that, but like the female name he'd given himself was one of about 3. There was a very funny moment during his court case where someone said, isn't it true that you were in jail? And he said, oh, that was just for passing bad checks in Wales. I was like, yeah, that's illegal.
Yeah. So you've been through all this. Now, can you talk to us a little bit about what has this meant for your career? You're so well known for your sitcom writing. Yeah. But it's not really.
I'm not really feeling very funny at the moment.
Right.
Yeah. I've had. I spent like 5 or 6 years writing a musical, the Father Ted musical, which we had it on its feet. It was ready to go. And now Hat Trick Productions and Sonia Friedman Productions are just sitting on it, and they refuse to produce it. Not only that, but they refuse to tell me what I've done wrong.
And it's because your name is attached. That's the problem.
They say if I remove my name from my own show, then they'll be able to move ahead with it. So I'm refusing on the grounds that I haven't done anything wrong.
Right. I mean, you just have an opinion that they don't happen to share.
Yeah,
What's that got to do with the show?
It's not just that. It's such a level of cowardice from these people. They could stand up for me. They could say, "Hang on a second, Graham has every right to talk about this issue," but instead they scurry away. They try and avoid any kind of mention of I don't get any emails. They don't respond to emails.
Right.
They won't tell me what I'm supposed to have done. So I'm unfortunately looking at legal action.
Yeah, but if you could go back, you wouldn't change anything.
No, because it's so obviously wrong. As I said, 9,000 kids. How on earth are we so blasé about kids' health? How on earth did it come about that these drugs sterilise children? One of the drugs is Lupron, which is a kind of an ancestor of the drug they gave to Alan Turing. And you remember when the Alan Turing kind of anniversaries were coming around, it was like, oh, what they did to poor Alan Turing. And now they're doing it to gay kids now.
Yeah.
But they're saying that this is great, and it's sterilising them, it's taking away their sexual, desire. And these kids, they don't know what they're signing up to. This is the most evil grooming movement I've ever seen. It really is.
We are now, though, seeing lots of changes. And, today we had the story about Dominic Raab now saying he's going to say that men who identify as women can't go to women's prisons.
May I tell you a funny story about that?
OK.
OK, here's the story about that, right? I met Kate Deacon, who runs Keep Prison Single Sex. It's not funny, it's horrible. But she said that the reason why male prisoners were put in women's prisons, first of all, was because they literally thought, no one cares about female prisoners, this will be our foot in the door, and then we can get self-ID in other areas.
Yes. Yes.
And sure enough, without anyone realising, this has been the policy for the last 4 or 5 years.
But no one knew, and that's why I've told people about...
Maybe longer than that, sorry.
When I've told people about the case of Karen White, identifies rapist, identifies as female, goes to a female prison and commits sexual assault on inmates. People think that can't have happened.
Yeah,
and so they think I'm lying, but it did happen.
But that's why my website, I don't think anyone really shares my website, because everything I put on it looks like I've made it up. It looks like something out of Father Ted, And it's like, as I said, I wrote somewhere recently, as soon as I started telling the truth, people stopped believing me. But that's kind of what's happening at the moment. It's just an extraordinary thing. My website, like every story, is more unbelievable than the last story.
No, I've seen it. It definitely is. We don't have much time, but I do want to ask just finally about this, because there's the closure of the Tavistock, there's Alison Bailey winning her case against her chambers. She didn't win against Stonewall, but it was found that Stonewall had given terrible advice, so no one's going to touch Stonewall with a barge pole now, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah.
So, because it's cost them a lot of money.
Yeah. Sure.
So don't you think that with all of these things, that maybe we're on that cusp, things are changing, and ultimately people are going to say, yeah, well, maybe he was right all along?
I'll tell you what the problem is at the moment. I mean, you really should be commended for covering this subject at all. But the problem at the moment is that, for instance, if you read The Guardian, you kind of have no idea that the Tavistock happened.
Yeah.
They may have covered it once, they may have just... But they generally try and either frame these kinds of stories so that it looks like we've done something wrong. Like, for instance, with Alison Bailey, even though Stonewall's advice was found to be illegal, it was found that it wasn't illegal for them to give it.
That's right. So the chambers didn't have to take the advice.
Exactly.
But it was terrible advice that cost them thousands of pounds, right?
Exactly, yeah. So hopefully... But, it's like they try and nitpick all these things, and what it really needs is it needs a proper investigation. It needs a team to figure out what on earth happened in the last few years that so many gender non-conforming and gay kids were put through this, as my friend Dennis Kavanagh calls it, the gender abattoir, Like where kids are put back into a closet made of their own bodies,
Yeah.
How did that happen? And the fact is that it's to the great shame of the BBC that they have not yet had the urgent national conversation that's needed around this issue.
To be honest, Graham, I think it's a question for historians.
Yeah,
probably.
Maybe.
But anyway, thank you ever so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.